Hello there, welcome to the Bardo podcast. In today's episode, we're talking about the Bardo. It's a Tibetan Buddhist idea often associated with death, but also something that might be happening all the time in moments of change, uncertainty, and transition. We explore some of the traditional teachings, including the Tibetan Book of the Dead and the teachings on the Six Bardos, and try to understand what, if anything, they might mean for how we actually live. My name's IMarc Salmon. I'm a comedian and a practicing Buddhist who definitely needs a lot more practice. I've also spent much of my working life in adult social care. And this is a podcast about comedy, philosophy, spirituality, and trying to think differently in uncertain times. Today I'm joined again by my good friends Dr. Steve Todd and Cesare Saguato. Steve is a long-time Buddhist practitioner and a theoretical physicist with a PhD in high-energy particle theory. He's also part of the Drukpa Kagyu tradition since the 1990s. Cesare is a Buddhist practitioner, psychotherapist and mindfulness teacher and chair of the Buddhist charity Bodhicharya UK. We recorded this conversation at the Bodhicharya UK Centre in Rochester, Kent, so if you're watching on YouTube and see us sat in front of Buddhas, just to be clear, we're not pretending to be great masters. We're just three friends exploring something we find meaningful. And just to say, we're sharing what we understand in the hope that it's useful, but we'd also really encourage anyone interested to explore the teachings more deeply through the original texts and qualified teachers. Anything we say that's accurate is thanks to our teachers, and anything that's confused, that's on us, and we apologise in advance. Also, I think we may start this one with Cesare singing a song for Guru Rinpoche, from who these teachings come. I'm very much excited about this one. I think it's a really, really good episode. So let's sit back, relax, loosen our grip a little bit, and float downstream as we enter the Bardo.
Do a quick song of a Guru Rinpoche.
Are you?
Yes.
Okay.
Spontaneous.
Yeah.
And all
Well, it's all spontaneous. Well, it's because I think it all comes from Guru Rinpoche, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Oma Hong Benza
Thank you. That's a banger. That's a banger, that one. Thank you. So we're going to discuss the Bardo today. And before we were sort of worried a little bit. We were like, listen, we don't want to be doing a teaching today.
Yeah.
But we're not teachers, are we?
We're not teachers. No. Yeah. We're just practitioners.
Yeah.
And enthusiasts.
Yeah.
And so I thought we're going to just discuss what the Bardo is. And I've invited you guys on because you're my friends. And that's what I want to talk about. And we've been looking through it as like a point of reference. We've been looking through the root verses on the Six Bardos. This is from a terma by Karma Lingpa. Maybe should we just try and...
I got a question for you.
Yeah, go for it.
Obviously, this is the Bardo podcast.
Yeah.
So what inspired you to call the podcast the Bardo podcast?
Well, the Bardo, the literal translation is like intermediate state, or like a gap and a transition.
Mm-hmm.
And it's normally associated with like people might have heard of it from like Tibetan Book of the Dead and like 1960s like psychedelic culture and stuff like that. Timothy Leary, the Harvard psychiatrist and acid guru, popularized it.
I think he wrote a kind of interpretation of the Tibetan Book of the Dead.
And then it's used in Tomorrow Never Knows, the Beatles song.
Oh.
They quote, turn off your mind, relax and float downstream, are parts of Timothy Leary's translation of the Tibetan Book of the Dead.
Did not know that.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
The Tibetan Book of the Dead is a very psychedelic sort of text, right?
Yeah.
And actually, the word, sorry, I've gone off on a tangent, but I was listening to a teaching, and they said that the actual phrase Tibetan Book of the Dead, the translation, was kind of, it was
sort of riffing on the Egyptian Book of the Dead.
It was a publisher's choice.
Yes, by Evan Wentz, right?
Yeah.
And actually, what the literal translation is the Bardo to Dal, right? And it's
Liberation upon hearing.
The great liberation on hearing during the intermediate state.
Not as catchy for
it's
the publisher.
Not as catchy, no. And what's nice is when you, I watched a really great documentary of Leonard Cohen narrating the Tibetan Book of the Dead on YouTube. And because they say the hearing is the last thing to go, as part of the dying process, they bring a lama in and they recite the text to the dying. And they have a horn and they speak into the person's ear and they go, "You're dead, okay? So you need to move on. You need to let go. You are dead. Forget about it." And so anyway, originally I just thought it was about that. And then learning more, I realized, it's about a transitional intermediate state. And we go through, we're always in some bardo or another. There's states of consciousness that have like a beginning and an end in some sense. And we're in between that. So for the podcast, it was like, well, this is the feeling I'm in personally. Like I feel like I'm always in a state of transition. And also I feel like as a culture, you could say, some people call it late stage capitalism. We spoke about the meta crisis before. There seems to be a sense of collapse. And so maybe we're transitioning, hopefully, into something better. I'd hope so.
Liminality, I guess.
Yeah, we're in a state of liminality.
Yeah.
So I feel like it just encompassed all those things.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah. But today I thought we could talk about, we're going to use a text as a reference. We're not going to read extensively from it, but it was a terma. So should we try and unpack what a terma is? Because I think that's a really interesting concept.
Yeah.
Who wants to go there?
Who wants to go there?
I think it's what I understand as a terma is that there was a great teacher called Padmasambhava that helped establish Buddhism in Tibet. Previously, there was another teacher. Is it Sankarakshita?
I'm not sure.
I think he was invited by the Tibetan king at the time, and to establish a monastery, a Same monastery, like patronaged by the royal family. But he was having a lot of difficulty doing it because the local deities and elements weren't very happy.
Yes.
So then he invited Guru Rinpoche, also known as Padmasambhava, to come and kind of pacify all the elements and actually bound them to protect the Dharma, actually. So they became protectors of the Dharma. And then because the conditions were made better by Guru Rinpoche, then they were able to establish Buddhism in Tibet and the monastery, Same monastery. And he had 25 main disciples. And from what I understand in terms of the termas, he planted teachings either in their mind streams, or actually physical teachings, maybe texts or certain sacred objects all around Tibet in caves and so on and so forth. And the idea is that certain teachings are prepared for particular times and conditions.
Yes.
So, in the future, this teaching will be really, really helpful. And then it will be discovered at that time. And then the rebirth of some of these disciples of Guru Rinpoche at particular times had these teachings arise, these mind teachings, these terma teachings arise, and then they would write them down, and then they would become known. That's what I understand as terma. I don't know if you know anything.
Yeah, well, no, the little bit I've got to offer on top of that is that there's a timeliness to them, so they're meant to kind of be discovered when they're needed. So there's a sense that there needs to be this kind of constant revelation or refreshing of the teaching to keep it relevant or fresh to the time. And so that's partly why they're sort of planted or hidden, so that they're discovered at the right time for the right situation. And there's, and within the teachings, there's this sort of sense of, how close are you to the original source? So a lot of tantric, teachings and Dzogchen teachings or whatever are considered to come directly from the Buddha mind, if you like, there'll usually be a named Buddha like Samantabhadra or whatever. And then that often then comes directly to a teacher, a human teacher, who then passes it on. And then the idea is that the closer you are to the original teacher who received it, the fresher or the more powerful still that teaching is. So if you receive, if that's come from Guru Rinpoche, then to someone, now who might receive a term now, then you receive a teaching from them, you're only like one hop away.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So that's a little bit of context basically for where like this text comes from. But what we want to talk about, I think, why is this relevant? Why is this sort of esoteric seeming and way that this even came to fruition? What does this mean to us? And like something I think we can focus on is that the different types of Bardo. So Bardo in some senses, I think about preparing how to die. And that's also how we live. But I wonder if we could go through, there's sort of 6 Bardos mentioned in this text. And I wonder if we could discuss a little bit and what it means to us, right? So,
can I just add a little something?
Go for it.
Yeah. So, why is it relevant? I think, everyone wants to know what happens when you die, right?
Yes.
Does anything happen? Does it just end in a black void? Is there an afterlife? What's it like? And, it also gives context and meaning to our lives. So, from these teachings points of view, consciousness doesn't end at death.
Yes.
Whether that's something that you're on board with or not, that's up to the individual. It also gives a kind of context to, as you said, learning how to live well, learning how to die well. So, what are the opportunities in life and in death? And from a Buddhist point of view, death is the ultimate opportunity.
Yes.
To be completely, wake up completely from the delusion and confusion that obscures what Buddhists call our Buddha nature, our true nature, and realize that clearly and be liberated, awakened, or enlightened, that magical kind of word. And so death becomes not something that is suddenly feared and, to be avoided or, taboo, which we have a lot in our culture. So I think talking about death and dying is really important anyway, and actually becomes something to be curious about, and seen as an opportunity. And then how do we make it an opportunity, and how do we train in life so that our life becomes meaningful and our death becomes meaningful, not just for ourselves, but for others as well. So we're all going to die. So that's why it's relevant in a way. And that's why people might be interested to listen to, from the Tibetan Buddhist point of view, what do they say about it, And so, that's why I understand.
There doesn't seem to be a consensus, as far as I'm aware, across different Buddhist traditions and lineages of exactly what happens. But we're talking about one specific type today.
Yes.
Sort of a map of maybe what may occur. But you're totally right. Like, I remember this, I think it was Nietzsche, it's like a quote that says it's a shallow culture that doesn't think about death. And I'm certainly death averse. And I said to my mum, I was going to do a podcast about this. She's like, why do you want to talk about that? You don't want to think about that stuff. And that's, that's how we respond to it. We're scared of it. And it's that mystery, that unknown is too much to bear, I think.
And I'm not sure the Bardo teachings will make you less scared. I mean, what they describe can be, some of the situations can be pretty terrifying. So it's
but so can life.
So can life.
It depends how we understand or relate to it.
That's right.
The opportunity, right?
Yeah, that's the opportunity.
And I think that's something it'd be nice to underpin throughout this whole conversation, that this is always an opportunity, and a Bardo is a gap. And it's always, every Bardo is an opportunity to become aware. And we can discuss this, we was talking about earlier, but we can discuss this. I wanted to perhaps read a quick part of this text, if I can find it. So this is from the first verse, which is about the Bardo of this life. And it says, "Alas, now when the Bardo of this life is dawning upon me, I will abandon laziness for which life has no time. Enter undistracted the path of study, reflection and meditation. Now that for once I have attained a human body, this is not the time to remain in the ways of distraction. So the Bardo of life is, they say that life is also a Bardo. How does that sound with you guys? Does that sound like a lot of pressure? It's like, do not be distracted. Don't be lazy.
I think it talks to me about gratitude, actually.
Okay, yeah.
So I was talking about the preciousness of human life.
Yeah.
And, I know myself and, maybe culturally, I don't know if it's an English thing, I'm not sure, but we can always moan about everything. Our life is difficult, there's this, there's that, there's problems, this, that, and the other, and so forth. And from one perspective, that's very true. But from the teaching's perspective, the fact that we have a human life, the fact that there's relatively more right with us than wrong with us, physically and mentally, the fact that at least us here live in a place where we're not fearing for our life, we're in a place of relative peace. The fact that we have enough food to eat, we have a place to live, and also that we have inclination towards a spiritual path and a connection to it, and we can receive teachings to work on ourselves and transform ourselves for our benefit, for the benefit of others. It's like winning the karmic lottery.
Yes.
When we look at it from that point of view, we're all, very, we can all be very grateful for that. And then it's like, okay, so let's make the best of this opportunity and make life meaningful. So that's what I take from that, and not so much the pressure, but like to remind myself, actually, there's a lot of good things going on right now, and also it's impermanent, it's not going to last forever. So how can I make my life meaningful? It doesn't have to be complex, it's just not harm myself and not harm others, try and help others where I can, and whatever way I can, we can, so that's how I take that.
I'd say we're already pressured. I'd say that we're pressured to go and find it outside, to go out into the world and find the thing that's going to make it all okay, that's going to make you happy, that's going to make you, we've all got a different vision of what that is, whether it's the perfect partner, perfect job, perfect car, whatever, but, we're all running after something. And the Tibetan word for samsaric beings is the goers, because we're always running after something. We're busy out there all the time, basically because we feel in ourselves incomplete or kind of broken or something, and we think the answer is outside. And so we spend our whole life running around outside. And so in some senses, we can take it like, oh, don't be lazy, but really that's saying make space, make time to find out who you really are, what your true nature is. Because if you don't do that, in these teachings, you're just going to die. You're going to go through a pretty traumatic experience in the Bardo, and then you're going to be reborn again, and then you're going to do it all over again, and that will carry on and on and on until you start finding out who you really are. So I think we're under pressure already.
I like that. That take,
I mean, it's true. And also we should think about maybe what laziness means here, because laziness isn't always just laying around watching Netflix. Which is fine sometimes, but it's also something I do is they call the laziness of busyness, and this is my particular problem. Where I am so busy, all the time. I can't do that. I'm busy, and I can't focus on practice right now. I have to do this and this and this. And the other day I had a little bit of an audit of my to-do list, and most of the stuff on there is not time sensitive. I do not need to do immediately, but I feel overwhelmed. There's so much information everywhere. There's so much data. I'm lost in it. I'm adrift.
Lost in data.
Yeah, I'm lost in data. And I think what this text is trying to do and these teachings trying to do is help us navigate that. Because that's what's happening in the Bardo. We're lost. We're lost. So, yes. Now, I think another thing you touched on there about precious human birth, about a sense of appreciation, that's where we start from. I think it's very important because it's not to bypass difficulties that people have, but to I don't know about you guys, but I think 9 times out of 10 we'll focus on the negative thing.
Negativity bias is a psychological trait that we have as humans.
And there's always things to appreciate. even the fact that you're not really rich and like a billionaire, I don't think that's actually so great. Like that seems like a lot of pressure to be a rich person who's got to hold on to all this material stuff, and you know, like people might even, you know, they want to tear them down, you know, so they have all these material comforts, but that's not going to help them at the point of death.
No. Yeah, well, no, there's a great. So there's the four, what they call the four preliminary or common meditations or reflections or whatever that turn the mind towards practice, and one of them is I can't remember what its proper title is. Well, no, there's precious human life, and then there's impermanence, and then there's karma. But it starts and says, "O King, at the time of death, your friends, your wealth." You know, all the things that we try to gather and accumulate
like
in life,
feast, they say at
won't
the time of
won't help you. It says, but your deeds will follow you like a shadow. And what it's saying is we're trying to accumulate the wrong things. So we're trying to accumulate things in this life which are like water in our hands and just flowing away. Whereas the one thing we're always accumulating, which is karma, is the thing we should really be looking out for. So we should be absolutely minimizing the negativity and increasing the positivity, because that's what we're going to have to face in the Bardo and in the future. So, you know, it's and it's interesting that the king, because the king's someone who's in most systems is the guy who's got it best, you know, is one who's made it. And saying, well, for everything you've got, that counts zip. Because, you know, clock's going to tick.
That's a great leveler, right?
Yeah, clock's going to tick, time runs out, time's up. And then, and then all you're really left with then is your karma. So if you've been a total asshole, that's your accumulation. That's what you've really accumulated. Yeah. So
I remember in a teaching once with Rinpoche, he was saying, you know, you can't take anything with you. And he said, you know, not even your iPhone. And even if you could, when you got there, it will start melting.
So we then come to the text. So let's talk about karma a little bit. There's a big part of this text is about karma. And I think I understand that as like causal momentum in a sense, that what we do now will go on to have an effect, you know. And so you said there that all you're left with is your karma. What's your feelings around karma? What's your understanding of it?
Well, obviously it's a very complex topic, but the way I currently understand it or grapple with it is from a point of view of, so we think we're separate from the world, and where Buddhism and many spiritual teachings lead to is this idea of non-duality, that actually nothing is separate from anything else, and everything is in some sense connected or even all one, but that's not quite the right term. So whatever you think you're doing outwards, out to the world, in some sense you're doing to yourself, because that is also you, because you're not separate from it. And so that energy or action or whatever has got nowhere really to go. So like a boomerang, it eventually comes back and hits you on the head if it was if it was a bad deed. So you know, whatever you push out ends up coming back. Every force has an equal and opposite reaction. So it's so that's kind of in a very kind of vague way how I think about it. And then on a practical day-to-day level, it's every single action you make has a consequence. And you know, there's that quote which I'll probably misquote now, but from Guru Rinpoche, which is, my view is as vast as the sky, but my attention to karma is as fine as a grain of barley. So it's, you know, you have to absolutely care about the details, because every detail has a consequence.
I think the only thing I'd add to that is that karma is very much tied with intention. So what's our intention for behind what we're thinking, what we're saying, what we're doing? Is it self-serving, or is it based on maybe ego grasping, fear? Is it motivated by those kinds of emotions, or is it coming from a more kind of open, kinder, altruistic, friendlier place? And from karmic point of view, the intention is what really counts. Not the action necessarily itself, or even the outcome, but the intention of the type of mind and heart that's behind it.
Yeah, and there's a sense of accountability and responsibility inherent in that, because karma isn't a cosmic payback scheme. There's no, in the Buddhist understanding, there's no God. being like, oh, you did that, now you deserve this. It is like a causal, sort of cause and effect, basically. Yeah. So the bardo of this life, this life that we've sort of established is an opportunity, and we can start from a sense of appreciation you sort of touched upon. The text then goes into this part that it's an opportunity for us for what? What do we think it's an opportunity for? It mentions the three kayas. Do we want to get into that?
Probably not.
But it's an opportunity.
I think Steve mentioned it already.
Yeah.
Like, recognizing your true nature. Yeah. Seeing how what you are clearly, be free from that confusion that obscures that, and the habitual tendencies that kind of get us all caught in a web of our own making. And ultimately, I guess, coming home to the original freedom and ease of being that is how and what we are, our nature, and learning to recognize and just rest in that, I suppose. And in terms of bardo or gaps, like, we can talk about it as, this text does, as in this life, dying, intermediate state, and so on. But we can also talk about it in terms of just a moment-to-moment awareness, and, noticing what's arising. Do we get caught up in the display of our thoughts, emotions, sensations, projections? Or can we kind of let that be and relax in more openness around that? And then, if we can learn to let go, which is a whole path, I guess, which is very hard, then that kind of space or gap is just present there, So I don't know what you said at the beginning. That's what I'm saying now. Yeah. Oh, what's the opportunity? Yeah. Yes, that's right. Yeah, that's the opportunity. Every moment, I guess.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which
go on? I was saying, in practice, how do people take that into their lives? Because it's kind of it's a classic sort of line that people trot out, isn't it? Oh, every moment's an opportunity. Then you think, okay, right,
how is that not just a platitude?
How's that not a platitude? Yeah. It's
practice.
Yeah,
I guess.
Yeah, but I think also to give people, I don't know, just give people a sense of maybe how that helps or can help. Is if you're starting feeling shifty, insecure, broken, you sat in your seat and you feel you've got to do something, there's a kind of shiftiness underneath that feeling. And it's what the practice about, I think, is kind of diminishing that shiftiness. So it starts feeling okay to be you and to be just sat in your chair. You don't actually have to get up and go over there and read that book or play that game or You can just sit in the chair, and that's okay. And it's and even saying that sounds a bit like provocative in this culture, where we always have to be busy and entertained and so. But the idea that actually you could just sit in a chair and just be absolutely okay and fine sounds a bit provocative. So I think that's the sort of beginning of the journey, isn't it? It's because some people sort of call it coming home. It's, what are you coming home to? And it's coming home to, I'm okay. I'm not broken. The answer isn't outside me. The answer is actually inside me. And that's what I've got to come home to. So I think that's always the opportunity. If that makes any sense.
It does. One thing it made me think of is that, especially with, things that are happening at the moment in the world, there's always things happening in the world, but let's not dwell on it, but, coming home, sitting in the chair, Karl Marx's son-in-law, Paul Lafargue, wrote, The Right to Be Lazy. It's actually can be a revolutionary act in itself to not get so caught up with the things that culture tells us, often our culture tells us that we need to do, which is living a life of stress and is causing many ill benefits to many people. However, I wonder how that squares with the need to take action. And so, we are in a world at the moment where I don't think it's going to become great unless we make it great. And we do. I think there is some collective need to change things together. because the structure that we're in is in many ways is not working. So lots of things are working, but there's many things that aren't. And there is we spoke about this in the last episode with the meta crisis. How do we not fall back into, you know, like maybe like a new age sort of thing of like, just be the light, just you know, this sort of thing.
But can I ask you a question in return to that? Because it's like usually when people say you've got to act, they've usually got some big project in mind.
Yeah.
And then you've got to say, well, where are you acting from? What's informing that project? What makes you think that project is the thing that's going to really fix it?
Yeah.
And the counterpoint to that could be, imagine a world where just everybody was 10% nicer to each other.
Yes.
That would be a far, far bigger effect than any project you can dream. You know what I mean? And I think it's often an ego trip to say you've got to act, when really what you can just be is a nicer person, because that's going to have huge ramifications to everyone around you. You know, it's like the bus driver, the famous bus drivers are always smiling and cheery when people get on board the bus and making everybody on the bus happy. You know, there's all these sort of stories, and they're small. And people don't like the sort of domesticity of it. They don't like the kind of small scope because they want it to be out on the big stage of the world, the Clash of the Titans, the drama, CNN, you know, whatever. But that's all just ego bullshit. You know? And it's like where life really happens is when you meet the person on the street. When you know, do you just cut them up, or do you know, after you, you know? And it's like, and in Buddhist sense, that's also where our practice is happening, because our emotions are flickering all the time. And if someone, you know, a thing I open the door, I quite like opening the door for people. But then if they just go through and sort of blank me, I think,
do you go?
And it's like, you know, I get an instant sort of like flash of anger.
Yeah.
But at least that's an opportunity to see that in my mind. That it's like I'm expecting some kind of gratitude or something back from them, you know, or whatever. Or I've got my own hang-ups about how they should behave in response to my act of what I perceive as my own act of generosity. So I think, you know, getting away from our grandiosity and big plans, where the front line is always right here, right now. You know, and I often think that the front line of Dharma is when you've got your cup of tea and biscuit. Yeah. Because that's where you feel most safe, secure, like you really know what's going on. I'm really going to eat this biscuit now. I'm really going to enjoy it. And the Dharma says, and that too is an illusion. So it's like, you know, it's easy when we think about bigger abstract external stuff to sort of say, oh no, that's what we've got to see as the illusion. But it's not. It's the absolute minutiae of our daily life that we have to see as illusion.
Can we explain illusion a little bit? What we mean by that? Because I think to some people that may sound like, oh, it's just all an illusion. You know? Yeah. Like maybe we could explain the two truths, perhaps. Or I'm looking at you, Cesare, right now. Please explain the nature of illusion.
Well, I was thinking about what Steve was saying. Let me see if I can get clear about it. Let's talk about dreams then.
Yes, right. Well, that brings us on to the next Bardo, which is there's 3 Bardos in
I mean, this is kind of how I've kind of understood it so far, conceptually, I suppose, because there can be if it's all a dream, like what's the point of doing anything, you know, and all that kind of thing, and or it's all a dream, it's a platitude, and all there is this world, and we've got to, you know, fix it and do lots of action and so on and so forth. But from a Buddhist point of view, it's like neither this nor that, and then both at the same time in a way. So when we're asleep and when we're dreaming, we experience ourselves, we experience the whole world, we experience people and all sorts of good things, bad things, and so on and so forth. And it seems so very real. And the thing about the dream is that it shows us that our mind is creating that reality 100%. Right? We've forgotten that we're in bed and so on and so forth, and we're creating this reality, and it feels very, very real. And then as soon as we wake up, we go, oh, it was a dream, and it just all kind of disappears and goes away. If you're having a nice dream, it's very pleasant. If you're having a nightmare, of course, it's very, very distressing. So from a Buddhist point of view, that analogy is a little bit further. Like, this life is a bit like a dream. So everything that's happened to us up until this point of us sitting here around this table, or whatever you're doing on watching this or listening to this, if you think of your whole past, where has it gone? It's like a dream. It's like you've woken up and it's gone. It's not there anymore, that kind of thing. So life is a little bit like a dream in that sense. And one analogy that I quite like is that when we, if you imagine that you're sleeping in, say, like a room with lots of people, and you're having a nightmare, and it's a really horrible nightmare, and then somehow you wake up and you look around, and everyone is still asleep, and you are so relieved. Oh my gosh, it was just a dream. It wasn't completely real. My mind was, helping me kind of create this. And you look around, and everyone else is still struggling. They're having nightmares. Now, probably you won't be so distressed that they're really in danger. They're really suffering deeply. But you're not going to not wake them up either, right? Because they're still suffering, because they think it's still real, right? So I think from Buddhist point of view, relatively speaking, we're all trapped in the illusion of this being exactly how it appears to be, completely real and solid, until it isn't, until we die and it all dissolves away, which we're kind of talking about here, right? And so as long as we're stuck in that illusion that this is all completely real and solid, it's our duty to create good dreams for ourselves and others with love, kindness, those little actions that you're talking about. And depends on our capacity and the, connections that we have. Maybe we can do bigger things or smaller things. It doesn't really matter. It's about where it's coming from, that intention again. So if we can do nice things, kind things, friendlier things, not harm people, that makes the relative dream around you and all those you're connecting with a little bit better. But it's not the end of it from Buddhist point of view. While we're creating a better dream, we want to also realize the true nature and wake up from the dream and help other people wake up from it too. Because unless we do that, there's always going to be some type of relative suffering. Even if your idea to act, whatever that might be, your utopia, you create somehow, dictate IMarc, right? Kind dictator Mark.
Why have I suddenly become?
Because you said you need to act, so I'm just playing with it, right? So even if you do that, it's not going to last. It's going to change, and you're going to die, and everyone living there is going to die, and something else will come. So it's never, relatively speaking, it's never going to be completely okay and satisfying until we wake up from the illusion that life is completely separate from us and solid and objective. And so on. So,
And my understanding of action is that when you approach things from that perspective, the lack of separateness and that wakefulness, then it's said that spontaneous action emerges.
Yes.
So it's not that you do nothing. It's that, you act from a place of wisdom and a place of compassion rather than the ego and its many, many traps, which are never ending, it seems, in some ways. So it brings us along to the Bardo of dreaming. So I think there's, according to this particular text, there's three. Whilst you're in the Bardo of living, there's also the Bardo of dreaming and the Bardo of meditation. And you that was basically a good summary of what...
Good segue.
Yeah, good segue, and a summary, I think, of what's important about dreams in Tibetan Buddhism. They're seen as a training ground. People might have heard of lucid dreaming and things like that.
So I've had a few lucid dreams in my life. Very, very few. They're very interesting experiences. I've had a few flying dreams, like most people. But some of the dreams that are most curious to me, though, were when my father died. I had a few dreams that he came back to life. And it was sort of seeing how I reacted in those dreams. So it wasn't necessarily how you would expect. I'll tell you the story now. But so I had one dream and he came back to life. And I said, Dad, how are you alive? And he said, modern science. And then my sister said, isn't it fantastic that he's alive again? And I said, we're only going to have to go through this all again.
Wow.
So that was
the death of losing him again. Wow.
And tidying up the house and all, sorting all that out.
Yeah.
So that was a funny thing. And then he came back a few more times. It was sort of slightly different. And then in one of them, again, I was having a conversation in the kitchen with my sister saying, "It's incredible, isn't it? Come back to life." And I said, "Imagine if this was just a dream, which it was a dream." But it shows within the dream how real it feels to you at the time, such that you're completely able within the dream. It feels completely realistic, but the details like someone can come back to life seem completely okay.
Yeah.
And then eventually, like the last, I guess, sort of happy dream I had was I went back to my dad's house and it had become much, much bigger and much brighter. And he liked to drink wine and he liked to paint. And there were all these, he was very happy in this one, these empty bottles everywhere and paintings. And he was fine. And then that was a kind of closure dream for me because it was like, okay, he's okay. He's fine. He's doing well. They were somehow quite poignant dreams for me. But the link then also with, say, meditation is, I was telling you before we start recording, that I often get quite drowsy and drop off. But then you have in the sort of hypnagogic state, you have these little micro dreams, and they can be very intense, and they can sometimes feel almost more real than waking life.
Like sometimes I feel like I'm looking through my eyelids at a vista or something.
And it can feel super intense. It can be very banal. Like I remember once in one meditation, I had like one of these dreams of a dripping tap. But there's nothing special about them, but they feel super real. And then you start thinking, well, what's the difference between that and then when I close my eyes and see this picture, this scene, and then that somehow starts to have an effect on the mind when you start leveling those out.
I think it also says something about identity. Was you going to say something, Cesare?
Yeah.
Go on, you go first.
No, I was just like, the other kind of way of looking at it is that, we really think and feel that I'm seeing everything out here, right? Like light is coming in and that's, I can see everything out there. But the weird thing is that, the brain is completely hermetically sealed in darkness, complete darkness. And the visual cortex is the back of the head. And there's just these like little kind of signals going through. So really we're like that brain in a vat experiment, so we're just, everything we're feeling, we're seeing, hearing, tasting, touching, is kind of dream-like created in our mind. And we don't really know what it's like out there.
Yeah.
So that's also another way of saying how the mind is so powerful to create our kind of lived reality and experience. But it has efficacy because it functions. And there's seemingly some interaction independently between me and other so-called beings out there as well. And that's where I think it's important that, it's dream-like, but no one wants to live in a nightmare. Yeah. Especially if they don't know if it's a dream. And even if you know it's a dream, it's still nice to have a nice dream. So that's, I think, where the ethical call to kindness and love and understanding and creating better dreams for people really is important, like paying attention to the grains of sampa or flour, like Rinpoche says, even though that you might have a view that actually this is a little bit illusory and dreamlike and not as solid as it appears. But I haven't realized that yet, And even those masters apparently that do, they still, pay attention to karma because of the interdependent nature of the collective dream. So if I'm starving, suffering, nowhere to live, those conditions aren't going to be conducive necessarily for your average person to start wondering about their true nature. So we need to, hierarchy of needs stuff, right? We need to, great practitioners, yes, they can realize it wherever, but average people, we need these supportive conditions, and it's our moral duty, I think, to provide them where we can, So yeah.
I agree. And I think we don't need to wait either till we have the conditions of like maybe a perfect cave or somewhere to go to, Like we can, the Buddha says himself, we can meditate when we're standing, when we're sitting, when we're walking, when we're laying down. That is the practice.
a cave probably wouldn't be very good for me.
Yeah,
because I'd be cold and distressed and scared. And, I wouldn't be able to meditate at all. So that's an imperfect condition for me.
Yes, it brings us back to that appreciation as well. This is an opportunity once again, and just like the dream is. So there's one thing that I think you both touched upon was. Sorry. One thing I think you both touched upon was I think we're getting a little bit around identity a little bit there. And you sort of mentioned that it's not as fixed and solid as we think, and the dream could be a good example for us to use that as a teaching in a sense. There is a transition from the day, the Bardo of living, to the Bardo of dreaming, and then another sort of you're reborn again when you wake up in the morning.
Yeah.
There's continuity between those two things, but there's a different particular type of consciousness, I think, in those. Maybe this can help us to understand the way that Buddhists look at maybe different, not levels, but different experiences. So you have some people, advanced meditators, train to be aware in their dreams, and then even aware into deep sleep, which I don't know about you, but I'm completely unconscious in that moment. Can we touch a little bit upon what this means, this sense of continuity, even though seemingly we're unconscious, there's still continuity?
Well, I understand. Well, it's a little bit like the etymology of Tantra, right? Like thread or continuity, which is the clear awareness nature.
Yeah.
So if we have a little bit of practice of meditation, when we're sitting, observing our breath, for example, there's lots of experiences that we see arising through our senses and also inside, like our mind, thoughts, images, and so on. So there's a lot of changing experience, sensorial and also inner experience. But then there's an awareness or a clarity or a space that isn't there. It's something as you can grab or touch or point to, but it's also there because it's knowing everything that's happening and changing, right? So that's really the meditation, actually, to recognize that and not be enamored by the phenomenal ups and downs and changes and bright lights and scary things and nice things and all of that. That's distraction. So if we can recognize this kind of open awareness, this clarity, that's the continuity. So if you're getting drowsy, like when you're falling asleep, you can be aware of the clarity of drowsiness, right? Which is a bit of a contradiction in terms, but you're aware that you're drowsy and so on. And then great practitioners of dream yoga can keep that clarity through the hypnagogic state. And then as the dream arises, they have that also that awareness and clarity, that they're dreaming, that this is kind of an illusion or of mind, like an interdependent arising. And then when the dream state also dissolves, it dissolves into like the primordial nature of awareness or the clear light nature of awareness, which is still that clarity that we were having the thread from being awake, falling asleep, and then in deep sleep. And that's meant to be, very kind of unbounded and unlimited. So that's the continuity as far as I understand it. And the indestructibility of how and what we are, although when we try to find it, there's nothing really we can pinpoint.
Yes. Yeah. And it's not something outside of us. It's
or inside.
It's not inside or outside. Yeah, that's a good point. But it's just there. But not there.
But not
well.
there. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, thank you. That's a really good understanding. And so the idea is to use the dreams to like strengthen the muscle to understand that this is projection, basically. And you sort of touched upon this here, like the brain in the vat analogy. Like, what we're seeing is... I like Timothy Leary actually coined the term reality tunnel. And we are in the middle of a reality tunnel, just like we are in a dream. We're in a different reality tunnel then. And whilst some of those reality tunnels are almost like reality labyrinths, they're interdependent and they're connected with others. They are nonetheless tunnels of perception. That's
I mean, well, you can have a sort of visceral sense of the tunnel if you practice a bit of mindfulness or whatever, because you can see how concepts collapse the world down into this very, very sort of. It is like a tunnel, and so you end up walking in the park, but you don't see a park. You almost see the word or the concept park. Yeah. You don't see the trees, you just see tree. Yeah. You know, and it gets more and more reduced until maybe you don't even see the park at all. You just see path to work.
When you're just off on your mind thinking about something else and not even seeing a tree.
Yeah. And it's like, and often sounds like it's hippies or come back to the present moment or whatever. But there's something about the sort of opening back up again of actually allowing the details back in. So when you actually see the tree, not just as tree, but as this incredibly sort of rich shape with all the veins on the bark and the leaves and the sun shining through and the sensation and the warmth and the smell, you're suddenly in a different world than you were 5 minutes ago, you know, and it feels, again, sort of viscerally, it feels better. It feels like a better world to be in than that closed down sort of little tunnel that we mostly live in. So, you know, we become these little sort of wriggly sort of worms. And we could inhabit this vast, you know, sparkly sort of universe.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mark and I had this conversation, I don't know if you remember a few years ago, that we were talking about computer games.
Oh, yeah.
And like how they've got so advanced now that, you know, when we were young, like the trees would load, you'd see them loading. And now they're like so super realistic and everyone's so excited. Like, oh, you can interact with everything. You can pick up this rock. You can look at this leaf. And it was like, well, that's what reality is really like. So we thought maybe we could do this workshop where, you know, you start with doing a bit of meditation and then you just go and explore the world, and interact with people. Anything, you know, what's under this cup? Oh, I can do that. I can look at this. And the few lucid dreams I've had, spontaneously, not because I'm trying to have them or I'm a practitioner of lucid dreaming, but sometimes it happens. I've realized I'm dreaming and I've looked at things and they've been like far clearer than my waking life, like this brilliantly detailed and kind of shiny. And it's like, wow, this is my mind, just my mind. You know? And there's a quote, actually. I know you said you'd like some quotes. I think it kind of, it relates a little bit to both the day practice and the night practice that we're talking about. It's from Rinpoche Talk, and it says, and all these thoughts and emotions and sensations that arise in your mind are yourself. Your mind is not coming at you. It's not coming to affect you. That is me. That is my mind. And, you know, usually I think, for me at least, most of the time, if I'm having a thought or a feeling or both, or a positive one or negative one, it kind of feels like they're kind of doing something to me. Like, if it's a nice one, it's like, oh, kind of, I don't know, massaging me, making me feel good. Yeah. If it's an uncomfortable one, I'm like being attacked and I've got to like defend against it and so on. But what kind of Rinpoche is saying here is that, well, actually, where else are they coming from other than your own awareness, your own mind? It's the display of our own kind of awareness. Yeah. And that's a little bit like the practice of meditation, to recognize it and experience, not just have a nice quote or have the idea of it. Yeah. And it's the same with the dream. The dream can make us like recognize that or realize that a lot more clearly. Yeah, actually, you know. Yeah. And it also relates to the Bardo too, because when we go into the intermediate state, when we have the kind of peaceful manifestations and the wrathful manifestations, we get stuck in the cycle of samsara if we think it's something out there happening to us. But if we realize, in that moment, there's no separation between that and my mind, it's just a display of my mind, then we can be liberated. Yeah. You know, so the dream practice, I think, is very, very powerful. The dream example is very powerful for this understanding.
Yeah, and that's the sort of core message of the whole of these teachings. Yeah, is to recognize that this is a display of radiant awareness.
Yes,
that's the core.
That's the core.
That's again and again and again. That is the task.
Yeah.
And so that brings on to the Bardo of meditation, which we're touching upon now. And I remember when we spoke about that, I remember talking to you about the computer game thing, because we were saying it's just ridiculous how like detailed reality is and how much we skip over, as you said, with our conceptual overlays. And I think we were like we were bent over in the middle of King's Cross, like looking at a leaf, going, look, can you believe this? Like we were on mushrooms or something. Everyone's like, move out of the way, we're in a rush. We're like, look at this leaf, there's so much detail. And it's like, what happens is, I think we've touched upon it. So the Bardo of meditation is another opportunity once again while we're in meditation, and that might not just be sitting, with our eyes closed, as meditation can be all the time. It's awareness. And in that is bringing an awareness to our conceptual overlays. And I think the issue that maybe is causing a lot of this continuation is the clinging and the grasping.
And it's the grasping at what? And what we're really trying to grasp for is reality, existence. Yeah. Because we want to exist as a separate being, and we want, therefore, a world to exist that this separate being can be related to, or something like that. So, and the problem, the problem with all this sort of stuff is that at the end of the day, it's our notion of reality, which is problematic. Basically, and that sounds crazy already, doesn't it? but it's our sense of reality that is the problem. Yeah. And getting back to the computer game analogy, it's saying you were playing a computer game so much that you started thinking it was real. That's kind of an analogy for what we do all the time. Yeah. That the display of the mind, we take it as if it's really real, the way we mistakenly perceive it in that moment. Yeah. And even going back to the dreams, in one lucid dream I had, it was sort of semi-lucid. And I'd gone to a restaurant, so there was a birthday party I hadn't been invited to, but my sisters were there, and I thought, what am I invited? And then I thought, I'm dreaming. And I thought, I don't have to get upset. This isn't even...
That's fully lucid.
That's pretty lucid. But then I stepped outside, and I saw the car going across the road, and I thought, can I just run across the road? It still felt like I could get hurt. Sure. So I was in this sort of state where it still felt real. Yeah. But at the same time, I sort of knew it wasn't. So, and I think, even if, I'm sure as you progress along the path, that probably is how there's a stage like that where it's partly real, partly not real, if you know what I mean. But yeah, so but I wanted to flag the thing about the problem really is this notion of reality, and that we're grasping at reality and wanting things to really exist in a way that they don't really exist.
And I think in that grasping of reality, because one thing that brought to mind of your experience was about solipsism. Yeah. And Aleister Crowley was a solipsist, and then he fell off his horse and then said, I'm not a solipsist now. Yeah. Because that hurt. Yeah. And I think there is like actual effects, and there is suffering, the appearance of that. Yeah. But one way I guess we could get out of solipsism, because if you start going, well, reality is not real, is it? So solipsism is when you just think this is just all a projection of your mind.
But that's just sort of super narcissism, isn't it?
Well, that's another reality that you're grasping at. Yeah. And I think these the Buddhist teachings, they go beyond that. So it's not your mind.
I think it's a really important point you're trying to clarify there. About Buddhism and the nature of reality and all of that. And it doesn't say that, things aren't real or they're not real. It's saying that they don't exist in the way that we perceive them to exist, which is quite different. Yeah. So generally speaking, it seems that myself and what I call the world exists separately, independently, and in a kind of unchanging way from their own side. Yeah. Yeah. So from a Buddhist point of view, that's not how things exist. Everything arises independence with everything else. So it exists interdependently. So it's not saying it doesn't exist, but it doesn't exist independently. And I think that's a very important distinction for people to understand. Otherwise, the confusion around nothing exists or everything exists can come in, and the Dharma is misunderstood.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to kind of say that, and it's also that things don't exist interdependently from the mind that perceives it as well. That's the important part, and that really relates to this whole teaching. Things don't exist independently from the mind that perceives.
Yeah.
Hello, just a quick pause to say if you're enjoying the Bardo podcast and you'd like to support it, you can do that on patreon.com/the Bardo podcast. There's a link in the show notes. The podcast will always be free and ad-free as well, but it does take time and a little bit of cost to keep this going. So if you do get something from it and you are able to support, even a small amount would genuinely help me. No pressure at all though, if money's tight, just listening is enough. I'm also starting a small online meditation session for listeners of the podcast. Nothing formal, just sitting together. We did the first one last week. It went really, really well. It's actually a really lovely way to start a Sunday. And they're going to be on the 2nd and 4th Sundays at 10:30 a.m. UK time. You can join as a Patreon supporter or just join as a free member. So if you're interested, just send me a message on Instagram at IMarc Salmon Comedy and I'll share the link. All right, let's get back to the conversation.
So we'll bring it on now to the Bardo of dying. And again, this is another opportunity and it actually says in the text to abandon all grasping, yearning and attachment and transfer awareness into unborn space. So the text describes what happens at the moment of dying is that all of the elements, the dissolution of the elements, it says. And
I'm not just checking my WhatsApp, I'm looking for a quote.
Well, and the senses, it talks about the shutting down of the senses as well.
Yeah,
so they say there's a particular sequence in which your sort of various functions shut down and the kind of experiences you'll experience along with that. So, and I guess if you're familiar with that, that becomes a bit of a preparation in itself, because you then already start thinking, okay, it's really happening now. I really am dying. Probably most people don't want to accept, I guess.
Yeah. It's related to the 5 elements, I think.
yes.
I don't know the exact sequence or the exact signs, but from Buddha's point of view, everything's made up of the 5 elements: earth, water, fire, air and space. So earth is like the heavy bones and flesh. The water is the blood and the liquids. The fire is the heat. What else did I say? Air is the
breath.
Cardiovascular system and the breath. And the space is all the space in between the elements, because without the space you can't have the elements. And when one dies, it's said that the elements dissolve into each other from the most gross to the most subtle. So from earth down into space. And I don't know the exact sequence, but earth dissolves first, and when it dissolves, the body starts to feel very heavy.
Yeah.
And then I think earth dissolves into maybe water or fire, I'm not sure. And then water, you feel very parched, and then fire, you feel very cold. So the reason why it's good to know that is if you're a practitioner, you can see where you are in the process, and you can start to prepare your mind in whatever way it can be, to maybe just simply to resolve to let go and kind of fly like a free bird out of a cage. Maybe you've got some kind of meditation practice, some kind of deity practice that you can, start doing and thinking of your teacher and so on. And just on that point, one of our friends and Dharma teachers, Tsering Paldrom, who has a really great book actually that's called Aging Body, Ageless Mind, which is all about, the experience of aging, or what it's like, and also death and dying. But the ageless mind is that kind of awareness that never gets tainted or made better or worse by youth or old age and so on. And there's a quote that I think is kind of relevant to what you're saying here, and it's called, it starts, "Detachment from this life." And she says in her book, "Material possessions, success, social status, none of that matters now. What I've been, what I've done, The joys and sorrows I've experienced have vanished without a trace, like the morning mist. I'm like the dreamer who wakes up in the morning. Laughter, tears, feelings, very real in the dream, have now evaporated. Material possessions will be left behind. The position or job I held will be filled by others. Others will dispose of my belongings, and I won't even take my body. When I give up all the things in this life, I give up problems, anxieties, ambitions, and fears. I'm like a bird, free to fly. A quick interlude to this quote, because it's relevant. Last weekend at the centre, we had a visit from Lama Rabsang from Palpon Wales, which was a wonderful visit, who helped fill our lovely Buddha there and gave some teachings. And he shared during his visit about an illness that he had a couple of years ago, where he almost died, and the doctors were telling him that, you know, it's quite likely he might die in the operation, this, that and the other. And then he said, when he heard that, he thought, oh, what a relief. You know, I can completely let it go and don't have to worry about everything anymore. And I was just like, wow, you know, that's a great reaction, because I wouldn't have that reaction. But there was, the way you said it, was like there's a sense of such, oh, great, now I can just let it be with everything, you know. Don't have to take the rubbish out tomorrow or whatever. Anyway, back to the quote. So, nobody was mine, nothing belonged to me. Everything was borrowed for a while. This body, which I will soon be leaving, was never mine. It was created from 84 minerals, 23 elements, and 30 litres of water, shared by 38 billion cells. It was home to billions of bacteria and viruses, a complex and extraordinary ecosystem. The butterflies, plants, rocks, oceans, trees, sharks' teeth, stars and planets that, broken down into their tiniest particles, made up my body during the universal twinkling of an eye, will be recycled into other beings and things. The body that I thought was mine will be returned to the endless cycle of life. The boat of my consciousness is about to cast off its moorings. On the quay are all the people and things of this life. I say goodbye to them with love and gratitude for their presence, and with my heart at peace, I let go of everything.
It's lovely. And that's what this is training for those moments, because it's the Bardo of dying. We're talking about the literal death, but everything's dying all the time. You know, like relationships, jobs, friendships, even just my dinner's finished. But something like that is so useful, because everything is on loan in a sense. And also that spoke to the point that you said earlier about things being interdependent. We're not. The label that we put on Mark, Cesare, Steve is not what's really happening. It's a process of interdependent elements. And there's some peace that could be found in that if we can truly get with it.
Reconcile with it. But well, no, but I think that's about learning to accept the present moment, basically. And it's sort of with stuff we were touching on earlier. But what we're really doing most of the time is rejecting the present moment. We don't actually want what we've got right here, right now. We want something else. We don't know what that other thing is, but we want it. So it's learning to just accept what's arising right now, and it's not saying you're therefore saying it's okay in the sort of conventional sense. You're not saying, but you're accepting that is your reality right now. Because most people don't even want to accept what they're experiencing is their reality. It's like something's wrong. You know, the TV's on the blink. I better try change another channel or something. You know, it's like,
it's an old TV.
It's an old TV. You got to kind of pretty old TV. But I need a new one. But so there's something about again, it's another one of those sort of platitudes, isn't it? Be in the present moment.
Yes.
But we're so unwilling to accept reality just as it's even presenting right now.
Yeah.
You know, and that's not the same as saying I'm not suffering or I'm not. You know, it's not like a positive thinking type thing in a way where you're denying your reality. It's saying, no, I am suffering, but in some sense that's kind of okay because that's just exactly what's happening now. And it doesn't mean that you're locked into that particular state of mind or whatever being, but unless we can really accept what's really happening now, we can't really make any progress.
And I heard a lovely teaching by Joseph Goldstein, really clear teacher.
Yeah.
And he was talking about, the Four Noble Truths, so the first noble truth is that there is suffering.
Yeah.
And then there are causes to this suffering, and then there's a way out of suffering. There's a path out of the suffering. But sometimes we don't appreciate the fact that we're aware there is suffering, is what he was saying. So that can be a lovely way to reframe in a sense. So because we're trying to grasp or we have attachment or aversion, so we're trying to run away from reality, what's going to happen is we're going to die. This is the teachings. Everything's impermanent. This is going to happen. And His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, does a meditation every single day. He does a death meditation where he prepares and he goes through it and to become acclimatized to this thing for himself and others. And when we notice and say, oh, look, there is suffering, I was washing up and I was like, I don't want to do all of this. And I was annoyed. And then I was listening to the podcast as I was washing up. Yeah. And then I had this moment, look, there is suffering. I was suddenly aware there is suffering. Yeah. And then looking at its nature, it then changed and moved. And that can be appreciation again to bring it back. That can be the start of where we begin from. And actually, I've heard a quote before which says that true renunciation is appreciation.
Well, I think my teacher said that once.
Said that.
I
say that all the time. I didn't realise.
So basically, renunciation and appreciation are almost the same thing.
Yeah.
And it's that kind of accepting the reality as it is now. That we make it a suffering by kind of through that rejection of the reality of now. I'm not articulating this fantastically well, but it's
maybe help you out.
Please.
Something comes to mind is saying that again. Another platitude that we hear a lot is just let it go.
Yeah.
Let it go. Memes, Facebook, everything.
Yeah.
Right? Well, if it was so easy, we'd be doing it. And sometimes if someone comes and tells you that when you're having a bad time, you might want to tell them something else, right? But I think maybe Rinpoche Tulku or other teachers have said that, before we can let anything go, we need to be able to let it be.
Let it be, exactly.
That's what you're talking about.
That's what I'm saying,
right?
Yeah.
So we need to let it be what it is. And that's the thing that's really hard, because it's hard to be in peace with things that are, maybe unpleasant or agitating or difficult, not necessarily outer things, but even states of mind, feelings, tensions in the body and stuff like that. And because our tendency is usually to kind of grasp at or have aversion to those experiences, that kind of solidifies and intensifies them. Everything gets a little bit kind of tighter, and it can exacerbate the experience because we're not letting it be. We're trying to do something to it. We're trying to have a different experience to what's actually arising in present. So learning to relax in meditation, I understand that, which is one of the key instructions that Rinpoche Tulku always says, relax and be aware.
Yeah.
I understand that instruction as learning to be in peace with and let be with what is. Mm-hmm. And that's so hard. And to do that, we have to let go of that aversion and grasping. And then when we can, if we have a moment of doing that, the thing that was suddenly like an ice block starts to melt and then flow because that's its nature. It's only the grasping at that kind of solidifies it and makes it seem solid and real. And I've got you said you want some stories today. I remember I got a story if I can share.
Yeah, go for it.
First I went to India. I was in Varanasi, where they have the burning ghats. It's a famous Hindu place to be cremated, because the belief is that if you get cremated there, you'll have moksha, you'll be liberated. So a lot of people will send their family there, and they have open pyres, And I wanted to see it from a distance, respectfully. But in India, there's a lot of chancers and scammers. So this guy came to me and said, I'm a guide, come on, I can show you around this and then. I was like, you sure? He's like, yeah, no problem. So he took me right in, and he took me into a very intimate spot where a family was standing in front of maybe their grandma, like being burnt on the pyre out in the open. I'd never seen a dead body in my life before. I'd never seen one on fire. And I was kind of taking it all in, but also feeling extremely awkward, like I shouldn't be here. Why am I in this space? And kind of moved on. But I did see the body and the burning, and I mean, not to be too graphic, but the fat dripping off, the limbs.
Yeah.
So we went away, realized what was happening, me and my friend, in terms of this guy trying to get some money out of us and so on. And then a day or so later, I got really ill, which isn't unusual in India, like with what they call the Delhi belly. But I, at the same time, think that visceral experience of staring mortality in the face had a huge effect on me, because my whole emotional world became extremely tumultuous, and there was so much grasping and clinging and suffering kind of going on. And at the time I was reading Eckhart Tolle's book, actually.
Right.
What's that called again?
The Power of
Now. Yeah. And I saw at that moment, because I'd also visited Sarnath, where the Buddha first taught, and I saw at that moment, like, wow, if I don't let go of this holding on, like, when I die, it's going to be really painful.
Yeah.
Because I've got to let go of everything then. Yeah. And it kind of made me realize humbly where I was at.
Yeah.
And, there was more practice to do, so to speak. And the one last thing I'll share that I was thinking about when you were talking, Mark, about problems in life and everything goes away, relationships and this, that and the other.
Yeah.
When I started to get this understanding, not that I was inviting things to go away that I liked in my life, but one of the key sufferings in Buddhism is the suffering of change, which is losing the things that you want to keep. And we all struggle with that. But I try to now, if that does happen, say, well, this is like a little mini training ground for death, because I'm losing this thing now. It could be I break this cup or my phone breaks or whatever. And that's, how can I relax with that and, relate to that in a better way? Because, at death, I've got to let go of more than my phone and my cup, right? Everything. One of the things about the Dharma that I think is so skillful and real is that it helps us transform difficulties and suffering and bring them onto the path in a way that can help us develop these helpful ways of being to reduce suffering at the same time. Yeah.
And the teacher Mingyur Rinpoche has a story about his brother when he was younger, and he was moaning about being in like Kathmandu and it was noisy. And his dad said, well, how are you going to deal with the Bardo? You can't deal with this noise. And it is true, isn't it? We get upset about a phone cracking. What's going to happen when we die? So this is a training to how to live and die together.
And apparently when the consciousness leaves the body, the mind is 7 times more sensitive than it is now.
Which brings us on to the next part, which is known as the Bardo of pure reality. And at this point, so the elements, the dissolution of everything that we've known, according to this understanding of our identity, even our memory in some sense, sort of go. But there is still continuity. And there is then apparently everything sort of fades into black, I've heard, and then there is a flash, which is a flash of a non-conceptual awareness, which is said to be our true nature. And there's an opportunity in that moment to recognize it if you're a great master. But, that's difficult, to realize that's your true nature, and there's an opportunity to find liberation. If you miss that moment, though, then what's said to happen is you go into the Bardo of pure reality, and this is the psychedelic part of the text, I think. You start to see all these different manifestations like a dream, but you start to have these visions because you have a Bardo body, like a dream body. Your consciousness is unbound now from material reality, and you're sensing forms, and you're totally in your projections then. And you have the peaceful and the wrathful deities. I wonder if we could speak just briefly about that and what that means to us. What would be the relevance of that?
Well, I think different cultures would have similar kind of stories of things you might see when you die. Someone talk about angels or devils or different kind of terms. And when teachers teach on this stuff, they say there is a cultural imprint. So you'll see shapes or forms that relate to the culture you've just lived through. So obviously in the Tibetan presentation of it, they're talking in terms of the deity, sort of meditation deities and so-called wrathful deities that exist in that cultural and spiritual practice context. But there's nothing sort of especially real about them in terms of, again, it's coming back from the mind and the mind's own imprints.
And it might be like Jesus or Buddha, you say.
Jesus or angels,
like a
or
scary demon or something.
Exactly. Yeah.
And William James, do you know William James?
Yes, I'm a big fan.
Yeah, he did varieties of religious experience, didn't he? And same thing, different people having different spiritual experiences, but through their own cultural lenses. So
and there's a sort of a flavour to it, which is what you're encountering is kind of like your balance statement of your karma. So if you've basically generated way more positive karma through positive action, positive deeds, positive intentions than negative, then what you see at that point will be a more positive, welcoming type of appearances. Whereas if you've created more negativity through violence, anger, hatred, or stuff, then what you'll see is these very, very angry, wrathful, hateful, destructive entities. So it's a sort of like, I guess it's a bit like a mirror to the karmic, balance statement of your mind at that point.
And you're ungrounded from reality. So you're experiencing all these visions, and it's quite chaotic. There's sounds and things happening.
But what do you mean when you say unbounded from reality?
You're ungrounded from your the bardo of living. We would say you have an embodied presence. You're no longer. It's like you're in a dream, as we said. Now you're in this bardo reality that your consciousness is projecting because that's its habits. So it's following its momentum, and so something that's important to say is like, when we get into these ideas of rebirth, what is reborn? Buddha was very clear that it's not a soul. It's not the Atman, and there's not it's a momentum. It's your karmic propensities. It's because that's what drives us in life, like our emotions. Sometimes we think it's facts, but it's not. It's our habits. It's our emotions.
Yeah.
So that continues.
Yeah.
And then you're seeing all these forms, right? But again, this is an opportunity to, you said, I can't remember the exact words you said, but it's to recognize that these are display of our radiant awareness.
Yeah. So, from what I remember, again, like I said, I'm just sharing what I can remember.
Yeah, I don't remember being in the Bardo of reality.
No, I don't remember. What I remember from the teachings about it, not that what I remember from the last time I was in the Bardo. I don't remember any of that. The wrathful and peaceful manifestations, I'm not sure if they're the karmic propensities. I don't know if they're that or not, but they're meant to be displays of the mind. And in Tibetan Buddhism, at least, wrathful deities aren't evil or angry. They're actually there to try and wake us up and remind us of our true nature and cut through the kleshas or the mind poisons and the karma that prevents us from recognizing them. But you're right. Once from what I understand from the teachings, once the elements dissolve and the clear light nature of awareness is revealed, because most of us haven't trained in recognizing that in the bardo of life and meditation and dream. We don't recognize it. It's so quick. And sometimes it can be frightening because there's a sense of complete groundlessness. So then the one wants to jump back into something that's more grounded. So then there's another opportunity to become free.
Every cycle is
an opportunity to become free. Yeah. So that's how generous reality is, right? And again, if we see these peaceful, wrathful manifestations, however they manifest culturally, so on and so forth, as something separate from the mind that's perceiving them, existing independently, something to grasp at because it's nice and pleasant, or something to push away because it's scary and frightening, then we miss that opportunity. If, however, we recognize that it's just a display of the radiance of our own awareness, then one moves to non-duality and can be liberated. But usually we miss that too. And then, as far as I understand, the Bardo of becoming opens up.
So I think when we talk about this kind of stage of these appearances, because from our normal experience they sound quite fanciful, you could imagine, it'd be easy to recognize that that's my mind, because I never see angels or yidams or whatever, but I don't think that's how it'll be experienced. I think it'll be experienced far more intensely than we experience reality right now. So I think it will actually be
we don't recognise our dreams every night.
Exactly.
So weird things happen in our dreams, like your dad coming back to life, and you're just like, okay, right. Science. That's it.
So,
And you were right, Cesare. I was reading this text and commentaries around it, and at first we have they're actually they're helpful. We see these peaceful deities or these peaceful forms. And if we don't recognise that, then the wrathful forms to be like, hey, to help us.
Come on.
But they scare us.
Yes.
What happens is we then run.
Yeah.
We run away from that. And I was describing to you earlier, I don't know if I can talk about this. I actually had an LSD trip to bring
on the way here.
Yeah, on the way here. I actually along this road many years ago when I was experimenting with psychedelics, and first time I ever had it, and I had to leave the house. It was too distressing. It was too chaotic. So I'm in a Bardo right then. I'm in the Bardo of pure reality. And I'm walking along this road. And this road, as we was explaining, used to be known as like the red light district of this area. And it was quite sketchy. It's like midnight and there's people with hoods and they're like demons like coming over me and I'm scared. I was on the phone to my girlfriend at the time, who we randomly bumped into on the way here.
Oh, it was that one?
What a synchronicity.
Oh, wow. Oh, it was that girlfriend.
I haven't seen in years and just randomly saw her. What a synchronicity. Wow. And so I'm on the phone to her as I'm walking along this road. Wow, that's just struck me how strange that coincidence is.
Same road, different
same
experience.
Road. And then I could hear her on the phone and she's like the Bardo of becoming, like she's calling me. That's safety. And I'm running towards that. And then I'm with her and I'm like, and I'm reborn again. Now I think that's a good articulation of what then is said to happen. We run from the deities, the fear, and we according to what we're our attractions.
Then the karmic propensities start to
and it's like
again, I think.
it's like a magnetic force. It's not necessarily what we find pleasurable either. Sometimes it's what we're drawn to, and that's our parents. And there's a Freudian aspect. Sometimes we're even, they say, sexually attracted a little bit to our parents. And that's when we try and find a body because we're so terrified and we're just like, please, I need a body. And that's what's said to be the cycle of rebirth.
Can I say, well, the funny thing was when we saw your ex on the other side of the road, who I kind of thought there must be some connection there. I said to you, is that an ex? He said, but I thought the look she gave you was almost like you were from another life. Which
it was.
In this context,
so many years
it was quite
ago.
funny. It was like...
what a synchronicity. I just told Steve that story and then, wow.
So, so cool.
But so with all of this stuff, as we said, these are all opportunities. And you can even be liberated at the point just before... the Bardo of becoming, every single point. I think at that point it's probably too late, but every single stage, every cycle in the Bardo of living, you can be liberated.
There's one other thing just to add for completeness, I think, is that human birth isn't guaranteed. So the six gates to the 6 realms open up. So based on karmic propensity at that point, because I think for most of us, unless you're like, on the bodhisattva boomies or whatever, you just get propelled by karmic propensities more or less. And, that if we're habituated to anger and hatred, then we'll have more of a hellish realm experience until that karma is burnt up. If we're habituated more to miserliness and greed, then we go into what's called the hungry ghost realm. If we're more confused and ignorance, then it's the animal realm, which people sometimes say that's controversial because animals aren't stupid. Well, they're not actually; they're very smart, but they can't really do so much for themselves other than eat and sleep and
they're not doing taxes.
They're not doing taxes and things like that, and they can't communicate very well or necessarily understand the teachings that can help liberate themselves. And although some bodhisattva sattvas are said to manifest as animals, so that's a different thing altogether.
Yeah.
But let's not get so sidetracked. So there's the animal realm, and then there's if you're habituated to desire and want, then it's the human realm, which we all know very well. If we're habituated to jealousy, then it's the demigod realm, and if we're prideful, then it's the God realm. But from, as we said earlier on, to circle back, precious human birth, as we described it earlier, is said to be precious because it's a balance between not complete suffering like in the hell realms or complete pleasure like in the God realms, and because of the human intelligence that we have and so on, it's the perfect conditions to actually wake up from that illusion and see our true nature. So that's a good rebirth is to be a human that is in, a peaceful situation, has enough to take care of its conditions, has a connection to teachings and teachers that, you can use to transform yourself.
The human life is seen as sort of like the middle, almost like the balance point of the crux. So the so-called lower realms, life just too full on or too painful or terrifying to be able to make any kind of spiritual progress. And above the human realm, it's all a bit too fun or enjoyable or delightful. You just I'll leave that till later. There's time for that. And the human, it's the right amount of suffering and lack of suffering that there's enough to sort of let your mind kind of seize the opportunity. But even within the human realm, not all births are, I think if you're born in a war zone or if you're born in, there's so much going on in the world at the moment, it's quite easy to imagine all the terrible places you could be born even as a human.
But I think some of these realms can be understood as we can see them all on this planet. And in our lives, in our lives, psychological ways of being. Sometimes everything might be going really well and everything's going great and everything we want just kind of happens, and that's like a God realm. And then our compassion for others can kind of close down because we think, I'm great, everything's good, and so on and so forth. And other times, you could have a hellish operation or whatever, and you feel you're in a hell realm, and all sorts of things. Jealousy, we've all been jealous. So the point is also to understand, I think, with the realms is that people say, do they exist or do they not exist? Are they just psychological or are they not psychological? Well, they exist as much as this reality that we're perceiving now exists. In the same way they exist interdependently based on the kind of mind that is perceiving this reality. And your road example is very interesting because you're the same kind of consciousness in a way, although it's like a stream. You had a hellish experience on that road, and today you had a very nice experience on the road, but it's the same road, right? So, but mind was slightly different.
And I think whether it's metaphorical, poetic, literal, the point is to reduce suffering and to reduce grasping. And again, it's always so with the.
And those realms aren't permanent as well.
No, and that's why it's different to have like a heaven realm is not a permanent realm either in a way.
Exactly.
All of these are psychological states, as you said, we can even recognize in ourselves. Like we cycle through these realms. So also, appreciating when you do have good conditions, understanding that might change as well. But taking that opportunity once again.
Can I just say a point there, just because I, occasionally take an Uber or something like that. And I'll usually talk to the drivers, and a lot of them have come from all different parts of the world, and you can often have very, very interesting conversations with them. And a lot of them, I would say, are like saints or bodhisattvas, and that's how I experienced them through those brief conversations. And there was one guy who, I think he'd grown up in Somalia, which obviously suffered a terrible civil war and stuff. But he said in his life there, in his childhood, it was like heaven. He was, he was a very nice, happy, reasonably well-to-do family. And then eventually it became like hell. So in a very short space of time, in one part of his life, he experienced heaven and hell, and probably everything in between. And it's like, so even within a life, we can kind of experience that cycling of different states and different,
I mean, I've never experienced anything like that, but I've had kidney stones and gallstones, right? And they're very, very painful. So one minute you're sitting, relaxing at home, everything's nice, fine. And then suddenly in the most excruciating pain, and then you're in hospital on morphine, like that. you know, or even if you don't go to hospital, the room that you're in seen as very different all of a sudden. You know, you're trapped, you're in pain, it's torturous, whereas before it was a pleasure playground with, you know, your TV and your Netflix or whatever, you know. So
to wrap it all up, basically,
tie bone on top.
Yeah, well, I think it's about how does this apply to our everyday existence. We were talking earlier about how everything is a bardo, and I think in every moment you're kind of going through these stages. So, you know, the example I was given is that you have you get an email from a coworker that is annoying, and you calm, and then suddenly the bardo of dying arises because you have a flash of anger, and your calm state is now gone. You're now in a new reality, and then from there, you know, there's a gap, and you could suddenly become aware, but likely you might not. And then suddenly you are projecting a ruffled deity onto the angry co-worker, and you're in the bardo of pure reality, do you know what I mean? And then you're reborn into a bardo of conflict. Do you know? It's like these moments are happening all the time, and we can choose to do it. I'm so conscious of time, because I know you have to pop off, Steve, but there is one question I wanted to bring up, because we're talking about karmic propensities. We're not going to have time to get into the storehouse consciousness or anything like that, but the karmic seeds that we print in every moment, we can see in our own lives how that then goes on to have effects, and that momentum continues. I had a discussion with Fair Rodil on a previous podcast, and he asked me a question about when we die, you know, do we dissolve back into like the ocean and then randomly appear again? And I've heard quite a few people sort of have this understanding that when we die, they believe that we dissolve like into the source, and then we're reborn again somewhere else or something like that. I think the Buddhist understanding is slightly different to that, in that there is an individual mind stream, and a relative individual mind stream.
Well, you know, Rinpoche, this summer camp, explained something in a way that I hadn't really heard before. I don't know if I can remember it very well. Like everything else we're saying today. But it's very much kind of more of a Dzogchen or Mahamudra view, a little bit related to that quote that I mentioned earlier. So how he explained rebirth there is, if you understand the nature of minds to be, we spoke about three kayas, so let's give it a go, right? From a meditative point of view. The nature of mind is described in three ways, although it's not three, but conceptually it helps us understand it. So there's the kind of open, empty, spacious nature, often described a little bit like space, because space is like not there. You know, I can't grab space and say like, here's a hand of space, but it's also there because without space, nothing else can appear. And then there's like the clarity part of awareness, which is the knowing aspect, which is a union with that space. It's not separate from that space. So it knows everything that's there or not there or happening or manifesting. And then there's a kind of continuously manifested aspect, everything that arises from it. Thoughts, feelings, sensations, emotions, human realm experience, hell realm experience, so on and so forth. Now, usually, we don't see or experience our self like that. We experience an I here and an experience happening there, right? But what's reborn, he said, is like when everything on death, when everything dissolves kind of back into that clear light nature, if you recognize that it's just your own propensities or your own radiance dissolving, there's liberation. And when it arises again, that recognition is still there, you're a Buddha, right? But we don't. So what's reborn is like, it is the dissolution into the kind of Dharmakaya nature, you could say. And then the propensities stir, and then the karma and the habit and the mind poisons and all that rise up again as something separate from the awareness that's experiencing it. And that's rebirth.
But it's not random, is what I was trying to get.
No,
you don't just dissolve into source and then randomly pop up.
No.
There is a continuity.
Yeah.
It's often described as like a candle.
Yes.
The flame passed on to another candle.
Yeah.
Is it the same candle? No, but there's a continuity.
Yes,
but,
like a stream.
Yeah, like a stream.
Like a river that's not the same river.
Yeah.
You step in it more than once.
But also in terms of the dissolving back into the source, you were never separate from the source. That's the illusion. The illusion is that you were ever separate from the source.
Point. Yeah.
So you've never not been the source.
It's a recognition. It's a recognition and non-recognition. If it's not recognized, there's an experience of rebirth and the whole reality.
The relative experience.
Because
right now we are not separate from we're interdependent of everything. That's what we are.
Can I tell you?
But we have a conception of it. But that's not real. In a sense, that's just a conception.
Can I tell you another dream I had? Sorry, just on this kind of point, because what determines the next shape of the next life is the karma. So I had this dream, and I was in a kind of the underground or whatever, and someone ushered me into a side door, and it opened into like this massive cave, vast cave, and there was this huge like coal mountain at the other thing, and that was my negative karma.
Oh, wow.
And it was vast. I was looking at it, and then I can't remember if it was in that dream or in a subsequent occasion, but it's like I thought every single little grain of dust in that huge coal mount of negativity is a situation I'm eventually, if I stay so it's a situation I'm going to have to revisit.
Wow.
But to put it in the positive angle, it's an invitation not to fuck it up next time.
Yeah.
Get it right. So each one can become a diamond, if you like, because coal and diamond are the same thing. If I get it right next time, if I don't stab the guy in the back, or if I don't, if I don't create negativity and I create positivity next time. So I've actually got near infinity of opportunities to work on getting it right. And that then kind of turns the whole thing from what could be a very gloomy picture into, no, that's my homework. That's what I've got to work on, basically. Yeah.
What I thought we'd do so we decided to do a little epilogue because we was a little bit rushed at the end. And I just prepared a few questions, really, of things that maybe we could get a little bit more clarity on, if that's okay with you guys, and things that we maybe didn't cover. One thing that I wanted to put a little bit of time into is about this notion of if we're made up of our habits and our causes and conditions, does that mean that we're just data in a sense? And I was thinking about like the tech bros, kind of this sort of techno-gnostic reality that they have where, they're very into the simulation hypothesis, that this reality is a simulation. And that kind of techno worldview, in a sense, kind of like is reified in that belief. And if we're just statistics and data, then in some sense that maybe excuses the consequences of our actions, And so, and also people like seeking AI to outsource things for themselves and stuff like that, right? And this optimum tech bro human. So I wonder if we could talk a little bit about that. I don't know if either of you have any thoughts about that. Are we just data moving forward?
I've got some thoughts if you want to share. So I think when you think of data's kind of inert, isn't it? And it's just a pattern, it's just a configuration. And the AGI community tend to think that somehow that magically springs into consciousness, but really it's just a pattern. And all LLMs is linking patterns. They synthesize patterns together from patterns they've already seen. So it very fluently, so it appears like intelligence or whatever, and it can even be functionally useful. But unless you believe a machine is already conscious in some ways, it's pretty impossible to see how consciousness springs up out of that. So I think, karmically, we have our patterns too, and you could say that's a kind of a data, that's a kind of a fixity, though it's always shifting, but we have something there. And I tend to also think of karma in a sort of slightly more embodied way, because data sounds quite flat. I tend to see it almost more as a holding. It's the way we're holding reality. So it's the way we're choosing to see reality, if you like. But the key thing in all of this is that is not us, so to speak. In whatever is alive in us, whatever counts as life, it's not that. So our karma is not our life. Our karma is the patterns and the shaping. and the life comes from the knowing, from the very conscious, alive element, and that's never patterned. That's just kind of where the pattern is being experienced or being known. So, but the big problem in all this is that we identify with the pattern. We tend to see the pattern as us, and it never was us, and it's always changing and always shifting. So I think that would be my response.
Cesare, do you have any thoughts?
I'm glad Steve answered it first. Because,
it was a very good answer.
Really, really, really good answer. Yeah. Yeah, I'm not that well versed in where the question's coming from. I've heard about the kind of idea that we're all a simulation and so on. So the only kind of thoughts I had about that would be that yes, we are a kind of simulation, that we don't know where the one running the simulation, if that makes sense. So when I hear "are we a simulation," the kind of thing behind it is like, is there someone else running it all? We're like stuck in the matrix kind of thing. But actually, because we get caught up in those karmic patterns and ways of perceiving and seeing things to be as they appear to be, as opposed to their kind of truer, deeper nature, then we're kind of caught up in our own projections all of the time. But as Steve is kind of saying, that that's not ultimately how and what we are. And there's the knowingness or the awareness or the clarity within which all that is kind of being projected out of and from. But there's a dualistic split where it seems as if that which is perceiving it and that is being projected is something other from itself. And then we get caught in the illusion or the projection of that. So I don't think there's like an overarching, architect that we're in an illusion or we're in a projection of or hologram or whatever of their making, but we're caught up in our own projections and holograms until we see it clearly.
Yeah. I think that brings us on a little bit, because I guess what we're talking about is that illuminating, knowing quality. That's like dynamic. Data for me feels a bit static, but it's like a causal dynamic awareness that illuminates the data, maybe we could say, is what we are in some sense. And I wonder if we could maybe make a distinction between rebirth and reincarnation.
I mean, what they say there is, if you're talking about reincarnation, there's a kind of implicit sense of something is transitioning from one body to the next body, and in that is an implicit reality, and then the whole framing, basically. So what you're saying is the framing of the body and the world that lives in is somehow real, and that this consciousness, whatever, is passing from one real body that dies then to another real body that's born. Whereas the language that's used in Buddhism is more commonly like a dream. So that the rebirth is more like the ending of one dream and the beginning of another. So it doesn't require there to be this kind of any kind of permanence in the dream contexts, after one ends or before the next one begins. There's not a sense of a greater permanent reality that you're being reborn through.
Yeah, I'd also add to that, which is the thing that is being reincarnated or reborn, if we can call it a thing. So in the language around reincarnation, as far as I've come to understand it, there's a sense of that there is a separate, independent, unchanging thing that goes from one incarnation to another, and whether we call that like soul or an unchanging self or something like that. So that's the flavor of reincarnation, I think. Like there's a string that goes through all the different pearls on a necklace, for example. Whereas rebirth is more like the stream analogy that you spoke about in the first part of this podcast, where there is a stream of consciousness, but there's nothing permanent or unchanging about it. it's changing moment to moment. So it's a little bit like in the tradition, they would say that, you get milk from yogurt, right? So through certain changes in processes, milk. No, yogurt comes from milk, right? That's right. It's that way around. But it isn't milk, is it? It's something completely different. But without the prior kind of conditions and the things that are added into it, then you wouldn't get the yogurt kind of thing. So it's not the same, but it's not completely different. And this moment is dependent on the previous moment, or this moment of consciousness is dependent on the previous moment of consciousness, but it's not identical to the previous moment of consciousness.
So if it's not linked to memory explicitly, and Steve, you said about a dream, and obviously we can't often even remember what happens in our dreams, but there is some continuation, so we're still affected by it. So maybe that answers the, what might come up if it's like, well, if it's not me exactly that's reborn, why should I care? Why should I care about my next life? I wonder if you have any thoughts on that.
Well, that's true moment to moment, isn't it? This in this way of understanding the kind of transition we're talking about is actually happening moment to moment, because the mark now is not the mark of 5 minutes ago. Everything's changed in your body, in your mind, subtly, but it's all changed. So it's not the same. It's not the same mark. And so when we want to say, well, it's not me, the me you're talking about there is a fantasy in the first place. So that's kind of where, that's where the real question is. It's not, I don't care, There's a very good Simpsons sketch about this. I can't remember the wording exactly, but it's, he's doing some crazy thing like he always does. Homer.
I know what you're talking about, yeah.
And and
he's drinking vodka and mayonnaise. He shakes it up and drinks it together.
And someone says, "Are you worried about how you're going to feel in the morning," or something like that? Terrible, like the consequences. And he says, "Oh, I really feel sorry for that, Homer."
Yeah.
Like in that sense, that's not going to be me. I don't have to deal with that right now.
Yeah.
And it's we haven't done the joke justice there, but it's a fantastic clip if anyone can find it.
I think it's a very good question, though, Mark, that you ask, and I've heard it before, and it can kind of get you a little bit stuck, or me a little bit stuck sometimes. But I think what Steve is saying is that, the idea that there's a me in the first place, like now, from Buddhist point of view, like a solid, separate, independent me, is from Buddhist point of view like an illusion, or based on confusion and not seeing things clearly. But it doesn't mean there's no me. This is often how Buddhist Dharma is misinterpreted, like there's no self, there's no me at all. There's interdependent arising based on the causes and conditions, which is what we are now, and it's how we're experiencing everything now based on those causes and conditions. And they will create the next moment of our experience also. It depends on what those causes and conditions are, and how will determine how we experience ourselves and we experience reality, actually. So if we care about how we're experiencing reality now in this moment, then it's the same as in the next moment, because it's not like the self disappears in the next moment. The separate, independent, permanent self, it was never there in the first place. So if we put in good causes and create good conditions in this moment, then we'll have better causes and conditions and experiences in the next moment. And why do we want that? Well, I think, like we spoke in the previous part of the podcast, we want to create a nice dream. We want to have good experiences and a good situation, so that we can actually wake up and see the true nature of the dream, and not be so overwhelmed by the raw, gross suffering that results from, unhelpful causes and conditions that go into the mix. So I think that's why it's important to care about, how we are now, how we think now, how we feel now, how we speak, how we act, and so on, because it will affect the next moment, and there will be a relative self-experience in the next moment. And until we're completely free from the illusion of grasping at that those phenomena of relativity, we will suffer if it's not pleasant, and we will have a nice time if it is.
And I think it also helps. My reflection on this as well is that, and what you both said is that knowing that basically we can see now that where we grasp identification, we can see that happening now, and we can see the results of that in the past. So, for example, seeing yourself as separate, independent, lasting, and singular, you can see how that hasn't always worked out for you. And you can see how that might not also work out in the future. Which brings me on to my next question, which is about karma. And I wanted to maybe see if we could create a distinction between karma and blame. I know in the last part of the podcast we said it's not a cosmic payback system, but if we're saying that it's causality, how is that distinct from blame? Because sometimes it could be interpreted as that.
Want to go first? I think my teachers always say karma is very, very complicated, so I think it's important to maybe to say that off the bat, that it's not as simplistic as and as linear and as black and white as perhaps we think about it. So there's many many causes and conditions, the whole web of interactions that we're not aware of.
Also, yeah, I don't want to ask what you mean by blame.
Yeah, that's a good,
because that's already assuming a whole way of seeing things. If you see what I mean. So
do you remember Glenn Hoddle, the England manager?
I know what you're going to say. Yeah.
So he got in trouble because he said something like disabled people was because of their karma in a past life, and that's why they're like that now. It caused quite a lot of trouble. And I think sometimes people do look at karma as in, well, they must have done something bad in a past life, or and I guess I'm talking about that judgment.
I think it's missing the point. I think it misses the point, because from a practitioner's point of view, we could say our karma is more about, if we're looking at that and saying that's blame, that's our karma by looking at someone blaming and being harsh. Whereas instead of that, we could think, well, maybe they're having a difficult time, they're suffering. How can I help? And then that's also our karma.
Yeah.
So,
I think this.
I was just one last thing. When it comes to karma and suffering, it's never about, someone deserves this, or they must have done this or did that. It's about responding with kindness and compassion. That's the practice of the practitioner, to transform our harsher, more selfish, fearful responses to ourselves and others in life, and develop kinder, warmer-hearted, more compassionate responses to ourselves and others in life. And that's transforming our emotions and karma. That's the practice. So I think that's the point, not just some kind of intellectual, how did it happen to them, or why are they getting this, that, or the other. That's missing the point, I think.
Yeah. So I would say it's kind of extension of what Cesare was saying, but it's never about blame. It's always about compassion. So understanding how karmic things from the past can cause, things to happen or appear or whatever in your current life is actually meant to be a kind of inspiring of compassion rather than anything else. It's not a sort of saying, oh, you must be a bad person. So it's, quite critically, there's no essentialist view of the person. People aren't good or bad. They're suffering under this sort of confusion of misunderstanding what reality is, and then they're reacting to what appears to them, which is based on karma. So there's a kind of while you're under that delusion, there's a kind of almost inevitability that you're going to act out, as it were, because it makes sense from within that way of mistakenly understanding reality. So then what you see is the whole of samsara as this kind of play, which you've played every part, and you're going to go round and round and round, continuing to play every part in the play, endlessly until you see it's just a play, if you see what I mean. But while you're in the play and believing it's real, you're going to suffer. And there'll be times you'll be suffering less and sometimes you're suffering more, but basically you're going to suffer. And there's no sort of moral high ground from anywhere within that, because the idea is your stream of consciousness or whatever has done all those things. Whoever you're pointing your finger at, blaming you, it wasn't that long ago you were doing that, And in some sense, that almost is you, because it's the same ground of consciousness that's in every being. So, and it's what conditions them is their karma, their current karma, and cause circumstances and conditions. So yeah, so there's no place to stand and say, oh, you're the terrible person, I'm the great person. It's like, well, no, you've been everybody, you've done it all many, 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 many times.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also karma is like the gross expression of one's actions of body, speech, and mind, based on a greater or a lesser understanding of how our true nature and the nature of reality or not. So there's no ultimately good person or bad person, and there's no ultimately separate, independent, permanent self in that sense. Like we said, it's we are a collection of those causes and conditions and have experienced things. So from a Buddhist point of view, it's more about seeing clearly, actually. So how clearly do we see how and what we are? How clearly do we experientially know that, or not? And there's a degree of depth of insight and experience into that will spontaneously have us act in positive ways for ourselves and others. And the more confused we are about that, and then the more we might act from a kind of unitary, self-serving, selfish, appearing selfish point of view. So it's karma is the kind of the thing that comes last, actually, and from the ignorance or confusion of not knowing how and what we truly are, which is ultimately, basically good for everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah. And can I just add another point on there, sort of following on a bit from what Cesare said? But it's like, we've grown up in a Western culture, and I think it's a kind of maybe a perversion of Christian teachings, or whatever. But you find a lot of people who consider them talk about morality often seem to want to talk about morality in a way to criticize other people, even though Jesus said the exact opposite. He said, "Check yourself first
before you wreck yourself."
But I think in Buddhism, ethics and morality are always there for yourself. Basically, it's nothing to do with judging other people. It's for looking at your own behavior and trying to find out, is that in accordance with awakening? What the Buddha suggested that the direct path for awakening is, or is it not in accordance with it? And that's the sole purpose of ethical behavior, basically. I mean, also the net effect of that is you lower suffering for everybody else as well as yourself. But it's not there as a kind of a stick to beat anybody else with, or even beat yourself with. Really, it's not like it's not a guilt thing. It's just like, did I do well there, or did I do not so well? That's kind of really what it's about, and then trying to learn with each step.
Yeah, and obviously it's called skillful means as well, which is about, as you said, was that, I guess, did that bring benefit to me and others, or did that increase suffering for me and others? And also karma, if we look at people as results of karmic conditions and things like that, then sometimes that can engender compassion too. When we see someone maybe doing bad things, as you said, we don't beat them with a stick, but we may say no and have boundaries and have compassion, but we transform our own understanding in doing that as well, because we suffer if we cling on and want it to be a different way as well. So it's all a means of transformation. So I think one thing I don't think we touched upon, but I was interested. I read a little bit about Dr. Ian Stevenson's work, and also some anomalous cases and near-death experiences. I'd say from my upbringing, there was very much an emphasis on the mind is the brain, and experience and awareness ends at the point of death.
Dr. Stevenson did some research into spontaneous, I think it was children between the ages of 2 and 5, like spontaneous cases where they would report these details of past lives. And then he would do field studies, and then he would go and check them, and they corresponded. And even what's really weird is that some of them had birthmarks and like birth defects, which related to like an injury, like someone was stabbed or something, and things like that. And I wonder if we could talk a little bit about the mind and the brain, and maybe the Buddhist understanding, or just your opinions on that.
One thing I just want to say about Dr. Stevenson for your listeners to know about, because sometimes when you hear that stuff, it might sound, then he might be a bit woo-woo or whatever. Yeah. But actually, a psychiatrist from the University of Virginia in the Department of Perceptual Studies, I think. And it's a department that has empirically as much as possible, because you can't empirically investigate these things like you can chemicals and so on and so forth. But over decades, like 50 years, there's a whole bank of research of these rebirth stories and people remembering their previous lives, and they've tried to be as, quote unquote, scientific and empirical in chasing that data, so to speak. And they're all bona fide psychiatrists, I think, aren't they? In that particular department. And they're not necessarily Buddhist or Hindu or come from a culture or a context that believe that. They've looked at it at kind of face value. So I think that's really interesting.
Can I just say quickly as well that his conclusions weren't that this was proof either. These were anomalous experiences, and suggested that our current understanding, isn't complete. He wasn't saying this is rebirth or this is reincarnation, but it is very interesting. And
So I just wanted to say that people can check it out online, and also there's YouTube channels and so on. So what was the question again, Mark?
I wondered if we could talk a little bit about the Buddhist understanding of mind and brain, and this idea that consciousness and awareness ends at the point of death, at the point of brain death.
Oh, you're asking all the big questions.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think the paradigm that consciousness arises as an epiphenomenon of more and more complex material processes, which is the common one, right? I think is not accepted from a Buddhist point of view. It's actually the other way around. Consciousness or awareness, or whatever you want to call it, is primary, and what we call the physical world emerges as a result of more kind of dense expressions of that, you could say. I'm not sure if that's completely dharmic, to be honest, what I'm saying there. But the brain is kind of like, or the body is kind of, brain and body is kind of like a receiver that is a condition for consciousness to express itself in a particular way based on its karmic vision. But it is not necessary for consciousness to exist. So at the time of physical death, the consciousness or awareness is kind of freed from the physical, what we call the physical aspect, and continues onwards based on those karmic causes and conditions. And also, as we've mentioned in the first part, there's that kind of clear light awareness, that thing that's there, that's not there, the knowingness, which is kind of ever-present continuity, but it's not a thing that can be grasped.
Yeah, and there's sort of mysteries as well around that in terms of Tukdom. There's an excellent documentary on Tukdom by, I think, is it Fergal? I can't remember his name.
Yeah, I was talking about it the other day with some other people. I can't remember the.
Yes, I'll find it and I'll share it on the show notes. But Tuktum, it said that very advanced meditators, because there's different levels of consciousness, we could say there's like gross consciousness, and I think we may have spoke about this in part 1. When you go into a dream, you have like dreaming sort of consciousness, and then below that in deep sleep there's still continuity of consciousness, but we're not normally aware of it, and they train with that, and then at the point of death they're able to maintain in this very subtle level of consciousness, this clear light, non-conceptual awareness. And they're studying it now because they don't know what happens, because the bodies appear not to decompose, they remain upright, and there's actually heat signatures around the heart area. And studies are still inconclusive, but it's just another anomaly that suggests that we might not know everything yet. Steve, I wonder if you have any thoughts to share on mind and brain, and maybe the primacy of awareness, or...
Yeah, well, I mean, I sort of start from because it's a sort of scientistic worldview that matter is primary and consciousness just arises this epiphenomenon. But actually, kind of, in just very basic terms, all we really know is our awareness, is our consciousness. That's how we experience everything. So it's always seemed bizarre to me that, given that's the only thing that we kind of really know, if you like, the fact that we know that we should arrive at a point where we then almost chuck that out the window. It's quite strange. So it's like, through a very complex analysis of what appears in our awareness, we arrive at the position that, the awareness is just an epiphenomenon. And somehow all of these abstract concepts are far more real than what we experience every waking moment, every moment that we're conscious. So that I've always found odd. And so I would lean more towards the primacy of consciousness, and because it's the only thing we really know. So and then people have been studying the brain for a long time, and there's clearly patterns of activation that are linked to perception, thought, action, but they call them the neural correlates, because it's still not at all clear how that would tie into or link with consciousness or whatever. So I'm not claiming to be any kind of expert on this at all, but just coming at it as a curious person. You kind of think that there's a certain camp out there that almost wants to say consciousness or whatever, awareness, is some kind of illusion. They want to say that's the illusion, even though that's the only way they know anything at all. Whereas, and I don't know what their emotional driver is to make them want to say that. And I don't think it makes them happy either. And I don't think it's ultimately defensible logically. So yeah, that's my jumbled answer.
Yeah. One thing I remember, do you remember when we read Mark Siderit's book in our Buddhist philosophy group, and we were studying Yogacara, the sort of impressions only, they call it. Sometimes known as mind-only school of Buddhism, but actually I think I like the translation impressions only. That, as you said, our conscious experience is primary in terms of how we experience the world. And Mark Siderich was saying that empiricism and science still exist within that awareness. You don't need to get rid of science or anything to make that shift. Cesare, was you going to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to mention this guy called Dr. Eben Alexander. I don't know so much about him, so check him out if you're interested. But I think he's a neuroscientist, I believe, and had a very scientific, materialistic worldview until he had a very rare form of meningitis infection in his brain. And I think he was in a coma for about 7 days. You can read about this on his website. And due to the infection, he shouldn't have really had any dreams, let alone any conscious awareness of anything or any memory. But he had a whole odyssey in other realms that he came back from. He survived. They were quite surprised he survived. And then he kind of wrote it all down. It completely changed his view on consciousness and reality, actually. So that's another just interesting example. but I was also thinking of like a meta question behind, like, why do we care about this? Like, why do we care that, do I continue after death, this, that, and the other? And I think it's maybe a samsaric care, like, I continue, I don't die.
Yes.
So again, we might be just missing the point, actually. Like, why don't we? The point is to investigate what is the nature of how and what I am now, and let's see that, because the great masters, do say, and it's not my experience, that, we see that there's nothing to see, but it's completely open and clear and knowing and full of qualities. So it's a little bit like, and there's nothing to die, actually, nothing to be born, there's nothing to be harmed or helped. It's like writing on water or birds flying over a clear sky. It leaves no trace, So I think that's really the thing to wake up to, and then all these other questions will resolve themselves.
I think you jumped the gun a little bit, because that was my final question, Cesare. So you preempted that. But I guess as well, it's within that. I guess another reason to maybe entertain these ideas is to know that we may not know as well, and to engage with the mystery in an open way. Because it may be the case that the consciousness is epiphenomenal, but we're not certain of that. And something I wanted to share, because we were talking about Timothy Leary in part 1, and I was thinking, I think it's in the film Waking Life, they describe, Timothy Leary said that brain function may remain active after the heart stops. And if you look at like cross-cultural near-death experiences, there's a lot of commonalities. There's like certain visions, like the white light and life review and ego dissolution and stuff like this. And Timothy Leary said, I'm looking forward to it, to my, because a dream can last like an infinite, it can feel like infinity, it can seem so long. So I'm looking forward to this as like a psychological transition rather than a void. And he said this is going to be the ultimate psychedelic trip, death. It's the final trip. And I think there's something hopeful in that, in opening to that mystery, because our culture, we have a lot of fear around this, and we don't maybe want to talk about it, which brings us to our final question, Cesare, which you sort of preempted, which is, what is the point in talking about this? Why does thinking about death, and, it seems morbid, but could it perhaps give us some urgency, some purpose, some happiness? What do you guys think?
Yeah, I think go on, after you, please.
Yeah, I think it can be very useful. So, we live in a society that tends to sort of shun death in a way, excludes it from public spaces and stuff like that. If you travel to some other countries, death is far more just part of the everyday experience. So we've sort of sanitized the traces of our own mortality out of our,
even old age. You put old people in certain homes and so on.
Yeah. And then I think the problem with that is it kind of it leans into certain tendencies of our ego, where we want to believe that we're kind of going to go on forever. And that in itself encourages some of our worst behaviors. Whereas if you're only here for a fairly short time, it kind of brings a different perspective to everything. And I think even getting older, people experience this naturally, because you start doing what some people call the death math. How many more books can I read before I leave the planet, or how many, and it just starts changing. And it's not like you've got this infinite road in front of you, and how, and you're making all your plans around that infinite road, or you're going to have this kind of long period of retirement where you're just trying to set it all up just right, So it's more, I think accepting our immortality really helps us kind of get perspective on our life, and maybe how we want to spend our time while we're here.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, when I turned 40 a few years ago, I thought, I'm probably half done now, probably on average, if I'm lucky. Who knows? I could pop off tomorrow or this afternoon. It just brings things into focus, doesn't it? Really, like, what is meaningful, how you want to spend your time, and who you want to spend it with, what you want to dedicate your life to. Not sweating the small stuff so much, and just the preciousness of everything. I mean, everything is pretty amazingly, fantastically weird when you think about it, right? Or just show up very clearly without too many preconceptions about everything. So I think contemplating on death and impermanence can really help us live well, and appreciate life, and people in our life, our relationships, and much, much more. It gives everything more of a sense of sacredness, I think. So it's not necessarily morbid. And remember, the Karmapa was saying in one of his many, many teachings that, impermanence allows life to happen. So without things changing, which is what impermanence is. Permanence means something does not change. It's not about how long it lasts or not. It's about whether it changes or it doesn't change. But without change, nothing happens, nothing grows, nothing develops, nothing forms, nothing dies. No one's born, So it's kind of very hopeful in some way, actually. The transformation can occur.
Yeah.
Because change is the nature of things.
Yeah. And I also think, as you both articulated there, not only does it bring an appreciation and a sense of beauty and a life-affirming idea, but it also, with continuity, as we've been talking about, and these ideas around the Bardo, whether they're true or not, we do know that, in some sense, what we do matters then, because it will continue and it will ripple out across space-time. And so we have the tremendous opportunity right now because, a tiny thing, I think there's a lovely quote by Rinpoche, Rinpoche Rinpoche, it's like one small act can blossom into, wonderful things because of interdependence. And I was just listening to a podcast and they were talking about how perhaps our consciousness is in some way being polluted at the moment. And Steve, we were on the train on the way to the Bodhicharya UK Centre last week, and you said, what's the point in doing all these esoteric practices? And you said, well, maybe it's to focus on something else rather than maybe Donald Trump, who's stealing our attention, and we do have a limited time on this planet. We need to act, we need to help people, and we need to help marginalized people, and we need to, there's emergencies, but we can also focus on what's important. And I wanted to just end with a lovely quote to share with you guys that I found from Mingyur Rinpoche about the Bardo. And let me see if I can find this. It was about living with that knowledge that everything's impermanent. So Mingyur Rinpoche, from In Love with the World, he said that the Bardo can be understood to mean this very moment. The nowness of this moment can be said is the continual suspension or pause in between our transitory experience. So it's the pause both temporal and spatial, such as the tiny halt that exists between this breath and the next, or the arising and fading of this thought and the next. The interval can also be experienced as the in-between of two objects, the gap between two trees or cars, the space that provides definition. We can understand this interval as the emptiness that allows us to see form. Actually, everything is in between. However minuscule the interval might be, it always exists, and it is always bracketed. Everything in this universe exists in between something else. From this perspective, the exclusive reference of intermediate to the state between death and rebirth emerges as the prototype for stages that occur within this life cycle. The Bardo stages then illuminate how these iconic death-to-life transitions emerge within everyday experience, which I thought was really great. and tells us how not to waste our life. I think.
Yeah, that's lovely.
So thanks so much, guys. This was a lovely. I enjoyed this epilogue a lot. I'm glad we did it.
Yeah, it was nice. Just on your last point about not wasting our life,
Yeah.
I think sometimes we can, because of culture, that we think we need to do many things.
Oh yeah, no, that's a waste as well.
Yes, I think you mentioned that in the previous thing, but just waking up and being present to our lives is really, it's not necessarily doing much more a lot of the time, but it's appreciating what is. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mark.
Yeah.
That's it for this week's episode. A big thank you to Steve and Cesare for that. I really enjoyed that conversation. I'll put links in the show notes if you'd like to find out more about their work and the Bodhicharya UK Centre. And thank you, as always, to anyone who's been listening, sharing the podcast, sending messages. It genuinely does mean a lot. If you'd like to get in touch, suggest future guests, or see what's coming up, you can find me at marksalmoncomedy.com. And if you did enjoy the episode, you can share it with a friend. Please subscribe, leave a review, comment. It really helps more people find it. And I suppose if there's one more thing from this episode, is that this moment right now might just be the Bardo. So yeah, maybe don't waste it. Alright, I'll see you next time in the in-between. Have a good one.